So let's begin. It's an hour until the hearing begins. I'm not going to stream the hearing live on my channel. There's a link to the hearing in the description if you want to watch it, which you of course do. And the reason I don't want to stream it on my channel, it's like, do you really want to see my mug the whole time that you watch the hearing? No, you don't. Okay, so I'm going to read the press release very quickly. Washington Subcommittee on Cyber Community Information Technology and Government Innovation, Chairwoman Nancy Mace, and Subcommittee on National Security of the Border and Foreign Affairs, Chairwoman Glenn Grothman, will hold a joint hearing titled Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, Exposing the Truth. This second hearing on the topic of unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAPs, will attempt to further pull back the curtain on secret UAP research programs conducted by the U.S. government and undisclosed findings they have yielded. The hearing will examine the Department of Defense's DoD reluctance to appropriately declassify material on UAPs and ways to make sure the American public is better informed on this topic. This is our second hearing on the topic of UAPs, and the American people are tired of the obfuscation and refusal to release information by the federal government. Americans deserve to understand what the government has learned about UAP sightings and the nature of any potential threats these phenomena pose. We can only ensure that understanding by providing consistent, systematic transparency. We look forward to hearing from expert witnesses on ways to shed more light and bring greater accountability to this issue, said Mace and Grothman. Is my audio okay? Looks like it is. No one's complaining. Okay. So I'm going to start off by reading a portion of Michael Shellenberger's witness testimony write-up. As you know, the four witnesses that are going to be appearing today have all submitted witness testimony write-ups for the congressional record. He wrote, President-elect Trump ran on and was elected with a mandate to make government more transparent and release long-held secrets on everything from COVID origins and the Hunter Biden laptop to the JFK files and UAPs. I encourage Congress to help the president-elect make the commitment a reality, including by extending stronger protections to at-risk whistleblowers, putting in place pro-transparency leaders of DoD and IC organizations, and passing the UAP Disclosure Act. This issue cuts to the core of our democracy. UAP transparency is bipartisan and critical to our national security. The incoming Congress and administration should work together to address it as a matter of acute urgency. We deserve the truth. Now, in that light, Tim Burchett wrote yesterday in a tweet, today I dropped legislation that would protect UAP whistleblowers. We need people who have the courage to bring the truth to light, and they need to know they'll be protected when they do. So the whistleblower protections right now are not as robust as desired. And that is why many whistleblowers have not come forward, as I understand it. UFO Titan wrote on Twitter, and right now I'm kind of giving you a zeitgeist of what people are saying before we get into some more of the written testimony from the four witnesses. UFO Titan wrote on Twitter yesterday, President Trump, Secretary of State Rubio, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, Advisor Trump Jr. I feel like we are at the end of the road 2017 started, especially with Lou testifying and the docs to come. A UAP-aware administration incoming with the desire to dismantle the deep state, it's now or never. All aware of the UAP issue. If there is a disclosure to make, it will be the next 4 years or never. That is if the Republic survives, laugh out loud. Daniel Miller wrote, UFO Twitter, with the hearing in the morning, I think it is important to keep in mind that the intended audience is not you who follows this topic closely, but for the general public and those who work on the Hill. The goal here is to start conversations and capture curiosity. I think that was an important tweet by Daniel because, you know, we are so immersed in this topic that we have such a high bar to be impressed or to be satisfied. But this hearing still might be very useful for informing the public who are not as immersed in the topic we are. So keep that in mind as the hearing goes forward. Now, here was a really fascinating tweet by Harold Malmgren, who was the advisor to President Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford, as well as many global leaders focused on trade, markets, geopolitics, and strategic security. He wrote, On November 10th, he wrote, how much government UAP knowledge Trump is thinking to disclose and how fast and how soon is probably under discussion by a handful close to Trump. As they consider what to do and when they must be mindful, China and Russia must also be readying their own UAP disclosures soon. And then he quote tweeted himself yesterday and wrote, China has also experienced increased UAP events. China has set up UAP monitoring in other parts of the world with a major site in Patagonia. There is risk that Xi Jinping decides to leap ahead to announce his leadership of all humanity to address otherworldly life. And that's an interesting point. Many people have brought this up, that the United States doesn't have to be the disclosure country. Other countries can disclose. It doesn't have to be Biden. It doesn't have to be Trump, and it doesn't have to be the United States. So I think that's a very serious consideration for Biden and for Trump moving forward, because the nation that discloses first is going to be seen as the world leader on this topic, which makes it all so the prize is available to whatever nation does it first. Why the American government wouldn't want to get ahead of that and prevent a competing nation from doing it first is beyond me. If I was advising the United States government, I would have told them to do it yesterday. Now, Lou Elizondo published an incredible video on Twitter at 3:16 a.m. last night. Yes, I was up like a silly boy. And he had the Capitol building behind him. It was like right out of a movie. And I've written down exactly what he wrote. And I quote, he stated, "Hi, everybody. Lou here in Washington, D.C. the night before our testimony. I just want to say it's been a long journey for a lot of us. And tomorrow is a culmination of many years and a lot of sacrifice by a lot of people. And I just want to say to all of you, thank you very much. Let's let it rip. Take care and God bless." So I like that. Let's let it rip. There's this one thing about Lou Elizondo that people may underestimate or not consider. He is extremely well-spoken. He knows exactly what to say, when to say it. He's playing 3D chess, always has been and always will be. And I think that he's going to intentionally say a lot of things during this hearing to get it on the congressional record that will lead to making it difficult for the Pentagon to deal with his testimony. I'll put it that way. And I think that's very likely. Okay. Now I'm going to read the entirety of Lou Elizondo's written testimony that he provided, I think, yesterday. And I will comment on it as we go. The reason I want to dive into the witness testimony, written witness testimony, is because that's really what the witnesses are going to talk about during the hearing. And so this would be getting as directly into what to expect in the hearing as possible. Now, let me begin. This is directly quoted from Lou Elizondo's written testimony. Greetings, Chairwoman Mace, Chairman Grothman, ranking members Connolly and Garcia, and members of the committee. It is my honor and privilege to testify before you on the issue of unidentified anomalous phenomena, formerly known as UFOs, on behalf of our brave men and women in uniform and across the intelligence community, as well as my fellow Americans who have awaited this day. Thank you for your leadership on this important matter. Let me be clear. UAP are real. Advanced technologies not made by our government or any other government are monitoring sensitive military installations around the globe. Furthermore, the U.S. is in possession of UAP technologies, as are some of our adversaries. I believe we are in the midst of a multi-decade secretive arms race, one funded by misallocated taxpayer dollars and hidden from our elected representatives and oversight bodies. So I wrote here, transparency on this is crucial if we are to successfully compete in this Cold War. So Lou Elizondo himself is very clear that there is a Cold War going on, sub rosa, amongst the United States and adversaries. I doubt he would name the adversaries specifically, but it's because I know that David Grush did, and he just said, use your imagination. Okay, I'll use my imagination. The adversaries being referenced are China and Russia. It has been said by some in the know that China and Russia have their own crash retrieval programs, and they have retrieved their own craft, and they have been attempting to back engineer these technologies along with the United States. And I think it's so critical for the United States to disclose, because the amount of people working on these back engineering programs is very, very tiny. And also, they don't really have access to our best minds, because the security and the secrecy is so stringent that they can only really invite people that fulfill that stringent security requirements. But if we were to have disclosure, guess what? All the best physicists in the United States would be clamoring to look at this technology and get the historical opportunity to try to understand it. It would be easier to get people into these programs to study these technologies, because there wouldn't be a cover-up. So they could do it in a very secure, safe way, but it would be that more scientists would be exposed to the reality that the United States government literally has non-human artifacts. So if we want to win this, so if the United States, I'll say it that way, if the United States wants to win the Cold War, then they really needed to classify the topic. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, in my opinion. Lou Elizondo continues. For many years, I was entrusted with protecting some of our nation's most sensitive programs. In my last position, I managed a special access program on behalf of the White House and the National Security Council. As such, I appreciate the need to protect certain sensitive intelligence and military information. I consider my oath to protect secrets as sacred and will always put the safety of the American people first. With that said, I also understand the consequences of excessive secrecy and stovepiping. Nowhere was this more apparent than in the aftermath of 9/11, which many of us remember all too well. I believe that America's greatness depends on three elements: a watchful Congress, a responsive executive branch, and an informed public. Over the last decade and a half, I learned that certain UAP programs were and are operating without any of these elements. Although much of my government work on the UAP subject still remains classified, excessive secrecy has led to grave misdeeds against loyal civil servants, military personnel, and the public, all to hide the fact that we are not alone in the cosmos. A small cadre within our government involved in the UAP topic has created a culture of suppression and intimidation that I have personally been victim to, along with many of my former colleagues. This includes unwarranted criminal investigations, harassment, and efforts to destroy one's credibility. Yeah, so Lou Elizondo has been on the other end of administrative terrorism. So has David Grush. David Grush, when he was on Tucker Carlson's show, spoke about how him and others were threatened all at the same time. I don't think David Grush knows where it's coming from. It could be coming from an agency within the U.S. government, or it could be coming from security services within corporations like Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, that are harassing him, threatening him, and it could be a combination of the two. But that's Lou Elizondo might bring that up in the hearing. The fact that him and others who are just trying to do the right thing by being honest with the American public about UFOs have been threatened and harassed. Let's continue his written testimony. Most Americans would be shocked to learn that the Pentagon's very own public affairs office openly employs a professional psychological operations officer as the singular point of contact for any UAP-related inquiries from citizens and the media. This is unacceptable. He's obviously referring to Susan Goff, who is a professional psychological operations officer. She wrote a whole paper on it. I don't think it's a coincidence that Susan Goff, who is a professional psychological operations officer, is also the one who is responsible for communicating all of the UFO information from the Pentagon to the public. I don't think that's a coincidence. Let's continue his written testimony. Many of my former colleagues and I have provided classified testimony to both the Department of Defense and the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Many of us have subsequently been targeted by this cabal with threats to our careers, our security clearances, and even our lives. This is not hyperbole, but a genuine fact, and this is wrong. So let's continue. I'm sure he'll speak about that today during the hearing. To fix these problems, I propose these three principal actions. First, Congress and the President should create a single point of contact responsible for a whole-of-government approach to the UAP issue. Currently, the White House, CIA, NASA, the Pentagon, Department of Energy, and others play a role, but no one seems to be in charge, leading to unchecked power and corruption. And back to me. I think that's a very interesting point. It's like the wild the UFO issue within the United States government does appear to be like the wild west in some capacity. You have different agencies involved in it, but there doesn't seem to necessarily be anyone in charge or it's almost like it's disorganized on purpose in some sense to allow the cover up to facilitate with a greater assurance that it never gets discovered by Congress or by the public because there's no like central control center. That's the impression I get. Let's continue with Lou Elizondo's written testimony. Second, we need a national UAP strategy that will promote transparency and help restore the Americans' public's trust at a time when the public's trust is at an all-time low. This strategy should include a whole of government approach, including the academic and scientific communities, the private sector, and our international partners and allies. Yes, back to me. That is sanity. That is sanity. The UFO cover-up is utter and complete insanity. You're dealing with the most profound scientific knowledge the world has ever known, which encompasses non-human species engaging our planet around the clock, residing in the ocean, flying in our skies, flying in space, coming in and out of our atmosphere, from space into our atmosphere, going into our oceans, coming out of our oceans. We don't necessarily know what their agenda is. And if we do, if we have some ideas, we certainly don't have the full picture. They've been here a long time. And yet we don't have academic and the scientific communities involved. We don't have the private sector involved, except for a select few aerospace companies in a very secretive manner. And it's all surrounding military and intelligence objectives, not science that involves all of humanity and to learn more about this incredible mystery. And we don't talk about this with our international partners and allies. This is absolute madness of the highest degree. The fact that this has been going on for at least 70 plus years, and it has remained within the confines of governments and a few select aerospace companies is just pure madness. Let's continue with Lou Elizondo's written testimony. Third, Congress should create a protected environment so whistleblowers desperate to do the right thing can come forward without fear. As it currently stands, these whistleblowers suffer because of stigma, a code of silence, and concerns about retaliation. These whistleblowers should be encouraged to come forward in ways that protect them against any forms of retaliation. Policies and procedures should ensure that protection. And for those who refuse to cooperate, it's up to the members of this committee and the lawmakers to wield their subpoena power against hostile witnesses and prevent additional government funding to those UAP efforts that remain hidden from congressional oversight. Yeah, we really need to get those subpoena powers going. I mean, right now we have Michael Gold, who was part of the UAP study program within NASA. We have Michael Shellenberger. Excuse me. And we have a few other people, such as Lou Elizondo and Tim Gallaudet, former Rear Admiral. He was also the head of NOAA. And those are strong witnesses. Don't get me wrong. Those are strong witnesses. But at some point, maybe we need to subpoena the head of the Director of Science and Technology of the Central Intelligence Agency. Or how about the Secretary of Defense or the Director of National Intelligence? Whoever we need so that the shenanigans stop and the lies to the public desist. Okay, and I think, okay, here's the last part of Lou Elizondo's presentation that he submitted to Congress for the congressional record. In closing, we as Americans have never been afraid of a challenge. In fact, we thrive on them, whether it's eradicating polio or going to the moon. We don't run from a challenge. We take it head on. To the incoming administration and Congress, I say to you, we need immediate public transparency. And I like the way he says immediate. And this hearing is an important step on that journey. If we approach the UAP topic in the same way we as Americans have had other challenges, we can restore our faith in our government institutions. Together, we can usher in a new era of accountable government and scientific discovery. I believe that we as Americans can handle the truth, and I also believe the world deserves the truth. Thank you, esteemed members of Congress, for your time today. It is profoundly appreciated by many. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I was watching Reality Check with Ross Coulthart in a recent episode, and he said that a big part of the persistence of the cover-up is because those who are involved in it don't want to be held accountable. They don't want any scrutiny for any laws they have broken. And I resonate strongly with that idea that the cover-up is largely about people not wanting to go to jail, people not wanting to be scrutinized. Maybe even government officials not wanting new laws to change the structure of the government, because I think that would be inevitable. I don't think you can have disclosure or UAP transparency and then the inner workings of your national security apparatus stay the same. I don't think that's very plausible. I think there would be a lot of restructuring within the government to prevent something like this from ever happening again. Now let's go into another witness that is going to be present during this hearing. That is former Rear Admiral and former head of NOAA, you know, the top meteorologist in the Navy, Tim Gallaudet. I'll start off by reading some of his written testimony. I'm not going to read it all. In fact, I curate the only written testimony that I will read the entirety of is Lou Elizondo. All the other ones I've curated. Let's begin. During this exercise, I received an email on the Navy's secure network. So he's talking about there was basically a training exercise that he's referencing that happened, I think, in 2015. So he says, during this exercise, I received an email on the Navy's secure network from the operations officer of Fleet Force Command. The email was addressed to all subordinate commanders, and the subject line read in all capital letters, urgent safety of flight issue. The text of this was brief but alarming, with words to the effect, if any of you know what these are, he's referring to UAP, tell me as soon as possible. We are having multiple near mid-air collisions, and if we do not resolve it soon, we will have to shut down the exercise. Attached to the email was what is now known as the Go Fast video, captured on the forward-looking infrared sensor on board on the Navy F-18 aircraft participating in the exercise. The now declassified video showed an unidentified object exhibiting flight and structural characteristics unlike anything in our arsenal. The implication of the email was clear. The author was asking whether any of the recipients were aware of classified technology demonstrations that could explain these objects, because DoD policy is to rigorously deconflict such demonstrations with live exercises. I was confident this was not the case. The very next day, the email disappeared from my account and those of the other recipients without explanation. Moreover, the commander of fleet forces and his operations officer never discussed the incident again, even during weekly meetings, especially designed to address issues affecting exercises like the one in which the Theodore Roosevelt Strike Group was participating. So the fact that the email disappeared, you know, that's indicative of a cover-up, frankly. Someone removed that email. It's been speculated that it might have been Immaculate Constellation behind the removing of that email and putting it into their archives, which allegedly has video, satellite imagery, even human intelligence reports about UFOs being seen in the whole 9 yards. And what's really interesting is the commander of Fleet Forces and his operations officer never discussed the incident again. That's really weird that the commander of Fleet Forces and his operations officer never discussed the incident again. Imagine getting this email. You're the head of meteorology in the Navy. You receive an email saying, does anyone know what this is? That it's causing risks for pilots in their lives. And then Very shortly after, the email is gone, no longer accessible, which is not typical because I think it's like an internet system on the boat. It should not be deleted. And moreover, the commander of the fleet forces and his operation officer never speaks about it again, as if it never happened. I mean, this just screams of a cover-up. They were obviously told not to talk about it again and to act like it never existed. I mean, it's just bonkers. Okay, here's another segment from Tim Gallaudet's written testimony. Last year's UAP hearing before this oversight committee confirmed that UAP-related information is not only being withheld from senior officials and members of Congress, but elements of the government are engaging in a disinformation campaign to include personal attacks designed to discredit UAP whistleblowers. Yeah, I mean, that's an ongoing theme, isn't it? The fact that there is a disinformation campaign to get the public to not pay attention to UAP, which, by the way, demonstrates that this upcoming hearing is not a distraction. It's not a limited hangout. I think it's quite obvious that the national security state would much prefer that there was no spotlight on this topic. It kind of challenges the whole disinformation campaign efforts, which is, of course, why the hearing is happening to begin with. Let me see how this is going. Okay, everything looks good. Let's continue. Here's another segment from his written testimony. And here he goes into why I think he's testifying and why he's being public about the UFO issue. And I quote, "I do this for several reasons. First, there is a moral imperative. We know from last year's hearings, UAP hearing and recent statements and publications by credible whistleblowers that UAP, non-human intelligence, and their technology of unknown origin represent a new realization that we are not the only advanced intelligence in the universe. Unelected officials in the U.S. government do not have an exclusive right to this knowledge about the nature of reality. The American people have a right to that knowledge." Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Let's continue. He writes, "There is a national security need for more UAP transparency as well. In 2025, the U.S. will spend over $900 billion on national defense. Yet we will still have an incomplete understanding of what is in our airspace and water space. I add the term water space because UAP have been observed in the ocean and are known to exhibit transmedium travel through the air-sea interface. These are often referred to as unidentified submerged objects, USOs. Whether aerial or undersea, UAP are operating unhindered in our seas and skies, and American taxpayers have a right to know why our military's massive budget is inadequately addressing this national security or this national defense deficiency. Additionally, more government UAP transparency has the potential to yield socio-economic benefits through increased open research. Our present understanding of physics is not capable of explaining many observations of UAP, and more research might lead to unimaginable advances in energy, transportation, medicine, agriculture, not to mention the paradigm shift that non-human intelligence represents in areas such as astrobiology, psychology, sociology, and international relations. Such research is the mission of Harvard University's Gallaudet project, which I support as a research affiliate." So back to my commentary. So this is going to be great because Tim Gallaudet is going to put a spotlight on USOs, unidentified submerged objects, an aspect of UFOs that really doesn't get enough attention. It's understandable why it doesn't get enough attention because we don't live in the ocean. We live on Earth. So most of the literature on UFOs focuses on sightings in the sky or landings because that's what human beings on the terrestrial plane experiences. But the reality is that UFO activity might be much more pervasive in the ocean than it is in the skies. They may these entities, these creatures, these civilizations may spend vastly more time in the ocean than in the sky. And in fact, if they do, I'm sure, we don't really know how much any particular UFO study program knows about this mysterious presence, but they certainly have better theories than we do, in my opinion, even if they don't have definitive knowledge. I would love to know what their theory is as to why the UFO phenomena is so attracted to oceans and why they spend so much time there. Now let's continue. And by the way, this hearing is going to put a spotlight on USOs, and depending upon how much press it gets, it could really contribute significantly to informing the world about the idea of USOs, unidentified submerged objects, which most people don't think very much about. Let's continue his written testimony from the curated citations that I produced. And I quote, "Moreover, Congress may now have not, it's a typo. Congress may not have known for decades to ask nominees to cabinet level and other executive branch positions about UAP during their confirmation hearings, despite the DOD's and IC's knowledge and efforts related to UAP. Were Congress to have been left out of the loop on any other issue in this fashion, it would be considered an absolute outrage. We have barely begun to consider the harm done to the legislative branch and thus to the American people by apparent UAP secrecy." Yes, we have barely begun to consider the harm done to the legislative branch and thus to the American people by apparent UAP secrecy. I can't agree with that more. I think the harm the cover-up has done, and this is me speaking, is hard to quantify. And I don't think we'll really have clarity on how much damage this cover-up has done until we get transparency, because some things cannot be understood until after the fact. And I think the UFO cover-up secrecy is one of those things. Let's continue. "I hope that not only this committee, but Congress considers the grave damage done to our system of government and contemplates action to halting it once and for all. For example, while I was preparing for this hearing, former DOD official Chris Mellon contacted me to seek my assistance in sharing with Congress the details of a case involving satellite imagery of UAP from 2017 that has still not been shared with Congress. He has also brought the specifics to the attention of AARO and says he is confident the new director of AARO will honor requests for access by the Oversight Committee. I would be happy in a closed setting to provide the dates involved if that would help the committee to formulate a specific request for access." So he's referring to satellite imagery from 2017 that Chris Mellon has seen. And I know what Chris Mellon thinks of the satellite imagery he's seen. I don't know if he's seen one satellite imagery or multiple satellite imageries, but I know that when James Fox was on the Joe Rogan podcast a while back, he referenced his conversation with Chris Mellon regarding Chris Mellon's being able to get access to satellite UFO imagery through the government. And James Fox said that Chris Mellon said the quality of the imagery is as good as you can imagine, 4K. So, and then there was a clip from that James Fox shared that he posted on Twitter. I think he subsequently deleted it, but it was from his upcoming documentary, The Program. And he spoke about this satellite imagery and said it was very compelling. So I forgot what I was going to say, but yeah, there's absolutely satellite imagery. Congress has not seen it. Why has Congress not seen it? Chris Mellon brought this up in the last hearing when he was with some of the same congressional bodies. He brought this up at the last hearing that he's seen satellite imagery that with his physics degree, he cannot explain, and he doesn't understand why Congress has not seen it. So that's a big issue that this satellite imagery has not been shared with Congress, the very Congress who have the security clearances necessary to see it. Let's continue with Tim Gallaudet's written testimony. Let me check on time. It's 11:03, so we got about 27 minutes. A more comprehensive approach is urgently needed, one that acknowledges the broader implications of UAP transparency across public safety, national security, and the socioeconomic opportunities that open research could unlock. Therefore, I recommend Congress to take the following action, which I believe would receive bipartisan support. Establish proper oversight of the executive branch's management of UAP programs, information, and materials. The first step should be to invite the director of DOD's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, to provide various committees a briefing on U.S. government UAP reporting to date. Additionally, AARO needs to explain the inaccuracies and incompleteness of AARO's first historical record report so that the Congress can understand, A, if AARO is failing to meet its congressional mandate, and B, under what authority AARO has conducted this and other examples of disinformation. I say this as a firsthand witness to such disinformation. And this is Tim Gallaudet that's speaking. During a meeting with the then acting AARO director and his senior staff earlier this year, I was the object of an hours-long influence operation which attempted to convince me of the validity of the severely flawed historical records report. Questioned well-known UAP reports such as the USS Nimitz Tic Tac encounter and disparaged several former government authorities who have published and spoken publicly about their knowledge of U.S. government UAP programs. If AARO is attempting to repeat the illegal and unethical DoD disinformation efforts involving UAP in the past, Congress should be gravely concerned. This is absolutely fascinating. Let's talk about this a little bit. What Tim Gallaudet is saying is that he met with Sean Kirkpatrick, as I understand it, and his senior staff. And for hours, they were trying to influence him to convince him that the historical report they put together wasn't flawed, that it was actually a good report. And everyone knows it was a bad report. Chris Mellon did a whole article in the debrief talking about how ridiculous it is. They also try to get him to question known UAP reports, such as the USS Nimitz Tic Tac encounter, as well as to disparage several former government authorities who have published and spoken publicly about their knowledge of U.S. government UAP programs. So Tim Gallaudet is saying that when he met with AARO's director and senior staff, they were acting as a disinformation operation. And interestingly, Stephen Greenstreet gave it was yesterday at 2 p.m. He gave a quote. He provided a quote from Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. And I quote, "Mr. Gallaudet is clearly still bitter that I didn't hire him into AARO when he came looking for a job. His predisposed tendencies for conspiracies without evidence made him unsuitable for a job that required objectivity and evidence-based reason. I verified my decision with some of his previous bosses and peers." Wow. That is a scorching belittling of Tim Gallaudet by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. Now, look, I wasn't there for that multi-hour meeting in which Tim Gallaudet claims that Sean Kirkpatrick and his senior staff were trying to persuade him to doubt the UFO issue, to give credence to the terrible historical report they put together, and also to look down upon several government authorities who have published and spoken publicly about their knowledge of U.S. government UAP programs. But what I will say is that I don't think Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick's scorching criticism of Tim Gallaudet is going to be very helpful, because if anything, it might embolden Tim Gallaudet to speak even more enthusiastically, aggressively, and candidly at the hearing than he might have otherwise done. Not that he's going to break his NDA or anything, but it might light a fire underneath him. Let's continue with Tim Gallaudet's written testimony. We got 22 minutes, folks. 22 minutes until the hearing starts. I hope this is useful for you. He writes, "The next step should be to invite the Director of National Intelligence and the National Security Advisor to discuss their predecessors' prior statements overtly acknowledging the existence of UAP. Does the government's current reluctance to disclose information about UAP originate at the top with the Commander-in-Chief, or are agency directors, deputy directors, and lower-level bureaucrats driving ODNI and NSC directions in this matter?" That's a fascinating sentiment from Tim Gallaudet. And this is something that I brought up myself. Why is the U.S. government officially downplaying UFOs, saying they're not, or leaning toward they're not, or at least being muddy in terms of conveying that they're beyond next generation technology? saying they have no idea what they are, saying that they don't know what they are and they don't know what to do and nothing to see here, folks, is essentially what they do. And yet what Tim Gallaudet is saying here is why have former officials of the government given a completely different message on UFOs? And then he wants to know regarding the government's reluctance to disclose information about UFOs, where does it originate? Does it originate at the top with the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States? Does it originate from agency directors, deputy directors, and lower-level bureaucrats? That's a very important question. Where is this downplaying of UFOs coming from that's stemming from the U.S. government? Who's behind it? It's a very important question, and I hope he discusses that in the upcoming hearing that begins in 20 minutes and counting. And here's the last part of his written testimony. In closing, I would like to share my personal reasons for speaking out on the UAP topic. And then he goes on to say, and this is another part that goes into why he has come forward on the UAP topic, and I quote, "Secondly, I have dedicated my entire career to the national security and economic prosperity of our country. Failure to share with the American people what is known about UAP leaves them in the dark on the biggest issue to confront human civilization to date. When has ignorance ever advanced society?" End quote. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great way to put it. When has ignorance ever advanced society? I think it's counterintuitive to think that covering up UFOs is going to somehow benefit society. It goes back to what I told you earlier, what journalist Ross Coulthart has been saying, something I've been saying myself, by the way. He didn't come up with it, but that the cover-up, at least from the U.S. government standpoint, I think is significantly fueled because they don't want to be held accountable for the cover-up that's been persisting for 70-plus years. Okay, so here, I guess this is the last paragraph of his written testimony, and I quote, "Lastly, at a time when leaders on the nation's biggest stage leave much to be desired, I feel it is my obligation to show moral leadership on the issue of UAP disclosure. And by that I mean providing top cover for the courageous men and women who have come out as witnesses and whistleblowers to expose the truth. My speaking out has encouraged others to do the same, and it is my hope that over time, the number of your constituents who want to know the truth about UAP will increase to such an extent that the congressional action I have just recommended will become inevitable." I think that's a great point. This is me speaking now. I think that my hope with these hearings, with this hearing and with subsequent hearings, because recall, Christopher Sharp said in a recent Liberation Times article that as he understands it, the hearing we are going to experience today is the first of many, and that these will unfold kind of like the Church Committee, which was a committee that addressed intelligence community abuses in the 1970s. So while this isn't the Church Committee, it's operating like the Church Committee, and it's not operating through one hearing, but multiple hearings. So this is basically, you could see it this way. The hearing we're going to experience today and the subsequent hearings is basically an operation by the Congress to dismantle the cover-up and to get the UFO subject under proper oversight. So this isn't, I think it would be a mistake to view today's hearing as just like, oh, just something that Congress is going to do. Today, we're going to have a hearing. Isn't that fun, everybody? Yay, we're going to have a hearing, talk about UFOs, and then go on with our lives. No, we're going to have a hearing, and this hearing is going to build and prepare us for the next hearing. That next hearing is going to build and prepare us for the next hearing, and so forth. And I think we're going to have hearings much more frequently, which is what I think Christopher Sharp said. So instead of, once a year or twice a year, it might be even more consistent than that. And especially as the awareness of the UFO issue increases, which it should, people are going to be more demanding. The public is going to be more demanding for these hearings, right? There's a lot going on behind the scenes. James Fox's The Program, I think, comes out in December. I don't remember the date. Dan Farr's documentary, which I have hypothesized, and I make it clear, I don't have inside information on this, but I have hypothesized or theorized that James Clapper, who has been the director of 3 separate government agencies, will be in Dan Farr's documentary and will back up David Grush's allegations. In fact, when I interviewed Christopher Sharp recently, he told me during the interview that Dan Farr's upcoming documentary will be, and I quote, earth-shattering. And when Commander David Fravor was talking to Ryan Graves on his podcast a while back, a year or two ago, I think it was a year ago, Commander David Fravor mentioned an upcoming documentary. It is believed that he was referencing Dan Farr's upcoming documentary. And he said that it's going to be a game changer. It will finally, something to the effect, it will finally make it so that the cat is out of the bag. And there are going to be some really important voices in that documentary. And it was that specific line, as I remember it, that there will be very important voices in that documentary that gave me this epiphany that the coup de grace, or the coup de grace, is actually how you pronounce it, that civilian analyst Matthew Pines was referencing might be James Clapper. And if it is James Clapper, he's likely going to be in the documentary. And so he might be coming out through the documentary. And then, of course, if James Clapper comes forward in the documentary, the media is going to hound him, and I'm sure he'll speak to the media about some of the things he said. Now, look, I don't know if he's going to be in James Fox's upcoming documentary. I don't know if he's the coup de grace that civilian analyst Matthew Pines referenced. It's just my guess right now. And of course, with all these upcoming documentaries coming out, new voices coming forward, many of them might be in Dan Farr's upcoming documentary. And then those new voices will likely get interviewed, or at least journalists will attempt to interview these new voices. It could create a whole kind of chain reaction that could contribute to more hearings. So let's keep our eyes peeled, fam. We have 14 minutes. If you've been with me the entire time so far, I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I'm not looking at comments. I'm kind of in the zone. I'm kind of trying to go as fast as I can and keep this as engaging as I can. Let's go on to Michael Shellenberger, who broke the Immaculate Constellation story and is going to be one of the witnesses today. I'm going to share with you some quotes from him. I'm not going to read his whole written testimony, but some. Let's begin. And I quote, "There is, however, a growing body of evidence that the government is not being transparent about what it knows about unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, formerly called UFOs, and that elements within the military and IC are in violation of their constitutional duty to notify Congress of their operations. President-elect Donald Trump and former President Barack Obama have said that the government has information about UAPs that it has not released. In 2020, during a podcast with his son, Donald Trump Jr., Trump said, I want to talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting." I'm sorry. Donald Trump said that. And I quote, "I want to talk about what I know about it, but it's very interesting." And I'll interject here. According to multiple sources, Donald Trump has been briefed into legacy UFO programs. Christopher Sharp has been adamant that it was multiple sources and that have conveyed this. And Ross Coulthart has said the same thing. Based upon that, and also Lou Elizondo has said he's been briefed. I don't think Lou said he's been briefed on legacy programs, but he's been briefed. It seems to me likely that Donald Trump has been briefed on the legacy programs. And as I've been saying and others have been saying, because of the fact that Donald Trump has been briefed on legacy programs, the fact that this issue is escalating very quickly in the public, and the fact that so much of Trump's administration are pro-transparency, there is no excuse, absolutely zero excuse for Trump not to disclose the reality of UFOs if Biden doesn't do it first. Let's continue some of the citations from Shellenberger's written testimony, and I quote, "Current and former IC officials have suggested knowledge of unreleased information in 2021. Former CIA Director John Brennan said, I think some of the phenomena we may be seeing continue to be unexplained. It might be some type of phenomena that results from something that we don't yet understand and could involve some type of activity that some may say constitute a different form of life, end quote. Said Avril Haines, the Biden administration's director of national intelligence, and I quote, there's always the question of, is there something else that we simply do not understand that might come extraterrestrially, end quote. Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chairman Marco Rubio, former Congressman Mike Gallagher, and long-term congressional staffer Kirk McConnell have said that multiple individuals with firsthand knowledge of UAP programs have spoken to Congress and or one of the inspectors general. And in 2023, a high-ranking former intelligence officer named David Grush testified to Congress that individuals told him the U.S. government has retrieved craft and biological material of non-human origin. So, look, there has been some criticism. Why is Michael Shellenberger one of the witnesses? And look, I don't know. Shellenberger broke the Immaculate Constellation hearing. There's going to be many more hearings to come. I think a lot of the more explosive whistleblowers are still reluctant to come forward because the protections aren't quite there yet, and or they might not have the courage to do so until until the UFO topic becomes more in the zeitgeist and Congress talks about it more and they feel safer to do so. We got 10 minutes and counting, fam. Let's do some more citations for Michael Shellenberger. I should have poured myself a glass of water, but I didn't. I'm really tired right now, actually. But let's continue. We got work to do. And I quote, in its report, AARO said it assessed as inaccurate the claim that the U.S. government is reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology and is hiding it from Congress. Claims to the contrary are, let me make sure this thing is still on. Yep, it's still on. Let's continue. Claims to the contrary are the result of circular reporting from a group of individuals who believe this to be the case despite the lack of any evidence. The former director of AARO has since resigned his position and has repeatedly dismissed and ridiculed the topic, claiming that talk of the phenomenon is due mainly to a small group of individuals in the grip of a rumor-based religion. But critics say that AARO's 63-page history of the U.S. government's investigation into UAP since the end of World War II was riddled with factual errors and poor referencing, including to Wikipedia. Imagine that, the 63-page historical report AARO put together utilized Wikipedia as its references. Let me continue Shellenberger's testimony, and I quote, and the document was missing historical information that appeared in the 117-page UAP timeline document that a former or existing U.S. government intelligence officer created, and which published last year and is attached as an appendix to my testimony. Christopher Mellon, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, wrote a lengthy rebuttal concluding, this is the most error-ridden and unsatisfactory government report I can recall reading during or after decades of government service. End quote. Notably, AARO's poor analytical tradecraft extends to recent highly publicized UAP incidents reported by service members. Political leaders from both parties have vouched for the credibility of UAP witnesses and whistleblowers. I've interviewed solid people, said former President Donald Trump in September. Great pilots for the U.S. Air Force, etc. They've seen things that they cannot explain. In June of this year, Trump said that the government has information about UAPs that it has not released. I have access, he said, and I speak to people about it. I've had actually meetings on it, and they will tell you there's something going on. And in his interview with Joe Rogan in October, Trump said the DOD or IC told him a lot about UAPs that has not been revealed. So there you go. Trump himself has gone on record saying he's been briefed, and Cold Heart, as well as Christopher Sharp, have said that he's been briefed about legacy programs. So, you know, if Biden does not disclose, we are all going to hold Trump accountable on this issue. That is for sure. Okay. I'm getting really tired. We got 7 minutes to go. I didn't sleep much last night, but let's go, fam. We got work to do. And I quote more of Shellenberger's testimony. And I quote, however, Senator Rubio noted last year, most of the UAP whistleblowers have held very high clearances and high positions within our government. So you do ask yourself, what incentive would so many people with that kind of qualification? These are serious people have to come forward and make something up. Rubio also said that individuals with high clearances and in high positions within our government with firsthand knowledge of UAPs were fearful of harm coming to them. Grush and other UAP whistleblowers say the government retaliated against them and tried to stop them from going public. Last year, Senator Gillibrand said, quote, "There's a lot of fear, and so I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of it. I don't know if we'll ever get the information about special access programs that are need to know, only that Congress has not been read in on. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it," end quote. Grush says he resigned under duress and went public to protect himself. The training and experience of many UAP witnesses and whistleblowers, including in the USIC and military, undermine facile dismissals of all these individuals as cranks and grifters, end quote. Let's do a little commentary on that. So here's a theme that cannot be denied. It cannot even be denied by a skeptic because it's self-evident and it's indisputable. And that is that so many of these witnesses have been threatened, harassed. Their security clearances have been threatened. Their very existence has been threatened. Michael Shellenberger wrote a whole article about it. This is not a new trend. This trend goes back 70 plus years. And so, you know, a skeptic can say, well, it's all misidentifications. They think they're seeing something in the sky, but it's really just XYZ. Skeptics can also say, well, what's really being covered up is secret technology. But what they can't say, in my opinion, they can hold no rational ground with the idea that all these witnesses are making up the allegation that they've been threatened and harassed, because it's a consistent theme that has persisted for decades, and it's coming from extremely credible people with high clearances and high positions within the government, and also from aerospace companies. And it's just untenable to say they're all making it up. And as these hearings continue in progression, I think that's a theme that we're going to hear over and over again. In fact, I would not be surprised if Lou Elizondo in today's hearing brings up the harassment and administrative terrorism that he's been on the other end of. And so that's great. The American public should be far more aware of these very un-American activities that are occurring, where witnesses to the UFO issue are being harassed and threatened just for wanting to tell the public the truth and to fix the government to stop the cover-up. Here's another citation from Shellenberger's written testimony. By the way, guys, we got 3 minutes left. I'm not going to be on the air during the hearing, but there's a link to the hearing in the description box below. So don't panic once this feed is over, because I have put a link to the hearing right in the description. It's there for you. And then here's a quote from Shellenberger. We have about 3 minutes. And now, existing and former U.S. government officials have told members of Congress that Aero and the Pentagon have broken the law by not revealing a significant body of information about UAPs, including military intelligence databases that have evidence of their existence as physical craft. That database he's referencing, I think, is Immaculate Constellation. I don't believe Aero was a legitimate program. It's not to say that everyone who worked for Aero was dishonest, but I think it was basically an organization set up to be a part to help perform disinformation, but also to learn more about what witnesses come forward and speak to Congress and speak to them so that they know where the quote unquote leaks are happening. So I think Aero is an organization primarily designed to help the cover-up navigate this new effort for transparency embedded in the national security state. That's my perspective. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my perspective. Guys, I'm going to wrap this up as soon as I see the timer go to 11:30. It's only 11:29. The hearing probably won't start right on time, but I thank you so much for joining me. Please don't forget to subscribe. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. We got Lou Elizondo on the stand. That's exciting. He's going to bring the heat. I have no doubt that Lou Elizondo will bring the heat, ladies and gentlemen, and people, all participants. I have no doubt Lou Elizondo is going to bring the heat. It's going to be absolutely fun. And as Christopher Miller said, this is not necessarily for us. This is for the public. We have much higher threshold in what we expect, what we want. But the public, this might be new for them. I'm going to click the end stream right now and go ahead and tell them Large Marge sent you.